Hey folks. One of the things which I like about the internet is that it makes it easier to access information which you probably wouldn't be able to find at your local library. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love books, but there are a lot of things that you won't find at your local bookstore or library. And one example of that is old product catalogs. Sometimes it's really interesting and enlightening to kind of look through old catalogs of products and see what companies were selling a few years ago or even a few decades ago, because we kind of tend to forget what people used to buy and sell back then and what things cost back then. And an example which is kind of relevant to my channel and the people who watch it is this, for example. This is Sierra's catalog from fall of 1988, as you can see. And I actually have this. I remember we actually got this with the Sierra game when we bought it way back in the late 1980s. And, it kind of has, let me zoom in a little bit, it kind of has the stuff you'd expect. I mean, obviously, there's King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest, stuff like that. And one interesting thing here, actually, by the way, check this out. This is not a secret. Like, I'm not the first person to reveal this. You might already know this if you're a Sierra fan. But check this out. These are screenshots from the then new Space Quest 3. And you see this green thing here? This is not in the game. I mean, if you recognize this scene, this is actually from where you start the game. If you go one screen down, then you get to here. So, and I don't know why the colors are weird. Like, you can see kind of everything here is kind of red. Like, all this stuff is actually kind of bluish in the game, but for some reason it's really red here. I don't know, the colors somehow got messed up in the printing of this catalog. But there's some kind of green creature here, which I guess didn't make it to the final game. I guess they were planning to have some kind of a monster or something here, and then they just took it out of the game because they didn't figure out what to do with it. So that's kind of interesting. Kind of interesting look at the past of what might have been, what Space Quest 3 might have had if, what they did have at one point in the game, and then it gets took out because it didn't work out. But anyway, yeah, I mean, this is something you can find online. But this isn't what I wanted to show today. This is just kind of like just kind of an aside. This is just some interesting little bit of trivia. But what I actually wanted to show was this here. So this is Sierra's 10th anniversary catalog. This is from the next year. So the previous one was from 1988. This is from 1989. And we actually have this as well. I remember we got this with a different Sierra game. And yeah, this is, again, Sierra's 10th anniversary in 1989. Pretty sure you will not find stuff like this at your local library or bookstore. The only place you might be able to find something like this is maybe on eBay, and of course there you'd get it at a collector's price. It would cost a pretty penny. It's stuff like this is collector's stuff today, but if you search the internet, you can find this for free. And, again, this is kind of like kind of the same stuff as we saw before. I mean, obviously, you have King's Quest, you have Space Quest, Police Quest. I think it even has, if we come down here a bit, Horace Book of Games, Codename Iceman. Yeah, it even it even has the original Quest for Glory game. And of course, back then it was still called Heroes Quest, but yeah, that's like the first appearance in the Sierra catalog of Heroes Quest, which of course became Quest for Glory. But anyway, what I wanted to show was one thing that sticks out here in my mind is this letter from Ken. Like this, it starts off with a letter from Ken Williams himself. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can read the text here if you want. Sorry, I know the text might be a little bit blurry. The scan's not the best, actually. But this letter from Ken relates a letter that he received from none other than Steve Wozniak, who hopefully needs no introduction. Was the guy who designed the original Apple I and Apple II computers. He did like the hardware engineering for them. And so Woz wrote a letter to Ken in May of 1981 talking about his airplane crash. And yeah, if you know the history of Woz, you might remember that he was a private pilot and he had a serious airplane crash and had, I think he had amnesia for a while, was in the hospital for a few months. But he mentions that he was playing a Sierra game on an Apple, which he says he was totally unable to put down. But the thing that really kind of blows me away, and probably blew Ken away as well when he got it, is the part, where was it? Yeah, the part here where Woz actually wrote to Ken, he even said that our game was the closest application to that for which I really designed the computer. Now that's high praise indeed. That's obviously a very strong statement. And the note here doesn't say which game Woz was talking about. However, one thing we can say for pretty sure is that if the letter was from 1981, as Ken recalls, then we know the game wasn't King's Quest or any of those other kind of 3D or pseudo 3D walk around adventures because those didn't exist until a few years later. In 1981, Sierra had only released games where you'd see a static picture, games like this. You'd see a static picture at the top, and then below that you'd have a few lines of text. And you can type things here. You can type commands like, I don't know, look around, you see nothing special. I mean, in 1981, Sierra had only released a handful of adventures. The first one was Mystery House. That was, the big game that broke Sierra big. Like, that was the big revolutionary game. That was their first game. And then they had a couple of other adventures. The one you're seeing here is Wizard and the Princess. The Wizard and the Princess. And both Mystery House and this game came out in 1980. And, they look so ridiculously primitive by today's standards. But the thing is, these games were special because they let you explore and interact with your environment. These weren't just, computer adaptations of arcade games that focused on shooting and action. These are games where the emphasis was on exploration and thinking, if you could figure out how to work the parser. I mean, you type north and you go north and suddenly here's a snake. Look, there's, lol, you are snake. So, the term adventure game didn't even exist at this time, but that's what these games were, and that's what these games would eventually come to be known as. So when King's Quest came around, when this was released in the mid 1980s, it was, I think, the first adventure game that let you walk around. It wasn't just pictures and text. You could actually have the there's some animation going on. You actually have an environment that you can physically explore by walking around. And I don't think there was anything like that before that. So, you have a fully explorable environment here. And it's not just pictures. I mean, you can actually interact with things. You can say, look at stuff, like look at the tree, and it'll give you descriptions, and you can try doing other things with the different objects in the game. And it's hard for me to really communicate how revolutionary this was. You could say, in a sense, that King's Quest was the first real open world game. And I know some people will debate that. I mean, there's always this debate about who was first, what was the first to do X. And I'll mention later, there are some other games which probably came before King's Quest, which were open world in a way. But I mean, I agree with Woz. I think that adventure games were kind of the culmination of what a computer is for. Because, before adventure games, video games were mostly just about action. They were about shooting and quick reflexes and stuff like that. And there's nothing specifically wrong with that. Like, I enjoy those kinds of games as well. I don't have anything against them. But, I think most people would agree there's not a lot of depth to them. There's not a lot, there's not a lot to such games. And the really interesting games for me, the ones that I actually get drawn into, are the ones that have kind of a larger world like this. The games that create a whole environment for you to kind of exist in and explore in. And I think a lot of people in the especially in the early days of video games, a lot of people say that video games are dumb, video games are stupid. I think a lot of people said that. A lot of people find video games dumb because of their lack of depth. There's just, in early video games there wasn't really such a thing as characters in the literary sense of, I mean, there might have been like like Donkey Kong had a couple of characters in it and stuff like that. But I mean, there weren't really characters in the literary sense of like people with their own psychology or motivations. You couldn't talk to them, or everyone in the game was pretty much just something for you to shoot at. And for me especially, I always thought it was a shame when games don't let you explore the environments or the objects in those environments. And that's still a problem even today. I mean, most of the things that we see in games today are just for show. You can't actually, like in a game like this, you can't actually open things up or examine them in any meaningful way. And the thing is, I'm clearly not the only person who felt that way or had thoughts like this. This is the help file for Battlezone from Microsoft Arcade, which was a collection of 5 classic arcade games for 16-bit Windows, like Windows 3.0, 3.1. And this will talk about playing the game. But if you go down here to the history of the game, there are actually a few anecdotes here about creating the game and remembering remembrances of the video game masters. But there's something down here which always kind of grabbed me, always kind of inspired me when I thought about it. Actually, a couple of things here. Check this out. The attraction of Battlezone's world was so strong that many players wanted to turn their back on the fighting. Because, Battlezone, it's a tank fighting game. But a lot of people decided they didn't want to fight. They wanted to drive their tanks up into the mountains and go exploring. And they actually had to put in a routine to send a missile after would-be explorers. So basically, they killed people who ran away from the fight and tried to go exploring, so that arcade owners wouldn't lose money, because a game would cost a quarter, and if you just ran away from the fight, then you could play the game forever and kind of hog the machine because nobody else could play the machine. So yeah, great legends emerged from the arcades that centered on finding a way to leave the fighting behind. And Lyle Rains, who was well, as it says, he was formerly VP of engineering at Atari. He's now chief corporate engineer at Atari. I think this is old information. I think he's moved on from Atari by now. But he was, a designer for, I guess, some Atari games. And he says here, one letter came in from Battlefield fan who said that a friend of his had told him that if you drove far enough, you finally got to the volcano. And if you drove over the top of the volcano, you could go down into the crater. And he said that inside the crater there was a castle, and you could go inside and explore the castle. And of course, none of this was true. I mean, none of this is actually in the game. This is all just somebody's made-up fantasy. I don't know why just somebody telling stories. But the thing is, again, if we go back to the game, like, let me close the help, and this is the game. This is Battlezone. This is the game we're talking about. It's so rudimentary. It was kind of revolutionary for its time, because those of you who remember Battlezone probably remember it's. I think it was one of the first-person video games, which is obviously a big deal. But that landscape, there's not much to it. And you can't even go to it. You can't actually go to those mountains in the distance. They're just for show. It's just like a backdrop. You can never ever reach them, even if you drive away from the fight. But the point is that you had people who wanted to do that. You had people who were more interested in exploring this environment than in this tank fighting that was supposed to be the focus of the game. And so I think that's why open world games are sort of the goal to which computer games, I distinguish here between computer games and video games. I think that computer games have always kind of been working toward this goal of giving you not just a shoot 'em up for 10 minutes, because the thing is, a video arcade, arcade games are not a good medium for exploration. Arcade games, you go there to have fun for a few minutes. Video arcades are not the kind of place where you go to play a game that lets you explore an environment for hours. You don't play games in an arcade, usually you don't play in arcade for hours and hours. So for something like that, you really need a computer, and that's why computer games, as opposed to arcade or more general video games, have kind of been working toward that goal, I think, of giving you not a shoot 'em up experience, but a real world, like a whole environment that you can just get absorbed into and explore for hours and hours. And again, I'm clearly not the only person who felt this way and feels this way. Another name who hopefully needs no introduction is Yahtzee. Yahtzee Croshaw. He's best known for his zero punctuation series of video game reviews. But besides that, he's done a bunch of other stuff. One of his other side ventures is called Extra Punctuation, which is basically like a kind of blog where he writes about larger ideas relating to the video game industry. And one of his most memorable Extra Punctuation articles, in my opinion, is this one, titled, as you can see, "The Open World is Dead, Sorry." And in this video, which also there's a text transcript below, but I'll play the video portion. Hopefully this isn't going to be a copyright problem. I'm just playing like a small snippet of this. But in this video, Yahtzee says,
"The history of the open world game might as well be the history of gaming itself. Its invention was practically inevitable. Something like it had long been the dream of gamers and developers alike, ever since we first played Super Mario and thought how cool it would be if we could escape from the fixed horizontal line of the level and explore that green hill in the background with the mysterious eyes. Or when we looked at the cosmetic windows on the buildings in, say, RoboCop for the Commodore 64 and thought about how cool it would be if we could go inside all of those windows and find an individually crafted room in each one and see what pictures the drug dealers hung up."
So yeah, again, I obviously wasn't the only person who thought about what a dream it would be to be able to explore game environments in more detail. And I think a whole generation of gamers growing up in the 1970s and 1980s probably had these kinds of ideas. But and these kinds of desires back when console games and even arcade games just didn't have the ability to really let you explore environments in the same way that computer adventure games can. So Yahtzee's comment that the history of the open world game might as well be the history of gaming itself meshes in my mind with Steve Wozniak's comment that Sierra's adventure games were the closest application for which computers were really designed, because the open world is really what decades of technological development have been leading up to: the ability to see more of the environment and to more fully explore and interact with the game environment. So, as I said, for myself, if I speak for myself personally, for me, in my heart, King's Quest was the first real open world game. But I mean, you could make a case for games like this. Like this is Ultima. This is Ultima One. This is actually Ultima came out in 1981. This is what we're actually seeing here is a later remake of it with better graphics. But it's still the same basic game. I mean, the gameplay is basically the same as it was in the original game. And you could make a legitimate case for the idea that this was the first, well, maybe not the first, but among the first open world games, because you have a world here, you can walk around in it. I don't consider games like this open world because you can't interact with stuff. Like you've got things here, but you can't really do much with them. You can't say look at the bush or look under the bush or take what's hidden inside the bush, things like that. There's a fairly limited amount of stuff that you can do in games like this other than fight monsters. Most of these games are based just around random combat encounters. And, for that reason, I don't really consider them open world games. But you could. I mean, you could make a legitimate claim, I suppose, that early RPGs like Ultima, which again, came out in 1981, or later RPGs like Wasteland or The Bard's Tale were open world games too. And there were also space games, which, tried to offer the ability to explore outer space. And of course, Elite was a huge pioneer here. Then later you had games like Star Control, which let you fly freely between different galaxies decades before No Man's Sky did it. And then in 1997, this happened. You had GTA 1, the first Grand Theft Auto game. And this is probably the game that really kind of kicked off the whole concept of sandbox games and brought public awareness to the idea of a video game as a fully realized world that you can move around. Because this was still something special at the time. Like a game like this that gives you the kind of freedom to just walk into a car like this and just start driving around, and you can just explore the whole city. You can just drive anywhere in the city and see whatever's there. Yeah, I know it's running kind of slowly in DOSBox. I'm sorry. This is the DOS version of GTA 1, and it is running a bit slowly on my machine. Apologies for that, but you get the idea. It's GTA. I mean, who doesn't know GTA, right? And the thing is, I remember when this game came out. I was reading a review about it in some. I don't remember where. I think it was in some. I think it was some major industry magazine. I forget which one. And it said basically the main appeal of this game was the crime. So it's like it'll appeal to you if you like crime, if you want to be a criminal, but for other people, there's not much here. And I disagreed so much, and I still do. I think that person just really didn't understand the game at all. The game's not really about crime. It's not about being a criminal. It's not about going on a crime spree. I mean, it is partly about that as well. I mean, yeah, of course, you do play criminally. You work for criminal gangs. But the reason why people love GTA, the reason why people liked this game and why the game became so important was because of the environment, because it gave you a whole city to explore. You could just drive anywhere around this city and just go anywhere and see anything here. So the crime is kind of incidental, I think. I mean, yeah, it is fun to go on a shooting spree and start, just take out a gun and just start mowing down anyone you see. I mean, you can do that to let off some steam, but it's almost irrelevant, I think. The crime itself is mostly irrelevant to the success of this game. Some people might disagree, but I think the reason why people played GTA, why people played this game and all the subsequent games, is for its open world, because it gives you that freedom. to go anywhere. It gives you like a whole map to explore and just says go crazy and just explore whatever is there. So, you know, the thing that really one thing that really kind of sticks out in my mind about GTA is that a lot of people said they didn't even play it for the missions, and I was one of them. It's like, yeah, there are missions. I mean, there's that yellow arrow that you're seeing that points to the telephones where you can run to the telephones and pick up a mission. But I didn't even play the game really for the missions, and I knew a lot of people who didn't. A lot of people said, I don't really even really care about the missions. Like, I'm not that interested in the story advancement. That's not actually why I play the game. The fun thing to do is just to drive around these streets and see what's there, and you can get out, you can step outside and start walking around like this. I mean, this is really what made the appeal of the game. So, there were a lot of people. I wasn't the only one. Again, there were a lot of people who just played this game by just driving around. They would just drive around for hours doing whatever they felt like doing, and they didn't feel the need to have a goal in the game. And I think this is where a lot of games drop the ball, because a lot of games today feel like they kind of ruin themselves because they feel the need to be games. Like, they would have been fine if they just had an environment like this, and you could just walk around the environment. But the games always feel like, no, it has to be a game. There has to be some kind of goal. There has to be, the player has to meet some kind of, performance standards or whatever. And there's the sense that it's like, it can't be fun. It's not really a game if you're not achieving some kind of measurable goals. And today open world games are pretty much the standard. Like, I think it seems like most games are open world games now. And I guess that's a good thing. I mean, it does feel again like this is what the whole computer game industry has kind of been working toward for several decades. Like Yahtzee said, the open world game the history of the open world game might as well be the history of computer gaming itself. But again, it feels like a lot of these games ruin their experiences. They ruin the experience of playing the game because they focus so much on the game mechanics. They feel so much like they have to include some kind of gaminess, like they have to include these elements that make it a game, because otherwise it doesn't meet some status of gameness or gamehood. They can't just be fun experiences. There has to be something to blow up or somebody to kill, or it doesn't even have to be violence. I mean, a lot of games are non-violent, so maybe there's not like some violent goal to achieve, but the point is that every game seems to feel like it has to have some kind of goal. You can't just enjoy being in the game world. You always have to be, working towards some kind of achievement. So coming back to Yahtzee's article and video about how the open world is dead, he also says,
open worlds are now commonplace. We've got games with entire, fully detailed cities, wildernesses, deserts, alien landscapes. You can go inside every window and look at all the drug dealers' furniture and knock all their chairs over and leave their taps running just to be a dick. And you know what? I'm sick of it. I'm sick of long treks through beautifully detailed scenery. I'm sick of highlighting the little icon and following the line on the minimap to get to it. And I'm sick of player choice. See, I'm someone who appreciates, indeed practically specialises in, the medium of interactive narrative, and open worlds are very frequently detrimental to narrative, or at least tend to produce very similar ones.
Now, Yahtzee's focus in games tends to be on story. Yahtzee is a published novelist, and in fact, he wanted to be a novelist for a career rather than a video game reviewer. So he's very strongly focused on the characters of a story and the settings and, of course, the overarching plot. But for me, the problem with a story is that it has to keep flowing. A story does not work well if it keeps getting interrupted. And I admit I used to think of computer games as a great way of telling a story. But one of my biggest problems with games today is when the games try to tell a story that keeps interrupting the game. The problem is that a story is something non-interactive, and a game is something inherently interactive. You have to play the game. You don't just sit and watch the game. So it's like games that try to tell a story typically kind of switch awkwardly back and forth between the two. So it's like you play the game for a while, then you have to pause and wait because some storytelling cutscene starts up. And then just when you're starting to get into the story, you're put back into the game and you have to start playing again. So you keep cutting back and forth between the interactive experience of playing the game, like operating the game, and then the passive, the non-interactive experience of just sitting watching the story unfold. And I'm sorry, I don't like that. My experience kind of suggests to me that if you want to tell a story with a computer game, the best way to do it is to just play the game, because your own actions and experiences and decisions in the game are the best story of all, because it's your story. It's your story that you wrote through your actions and decisions, and your experiences which you had spontaneously as part of playing the game, instead of being part of the narrative which some story writer felt the need to impose upon the game. Yahtzee says that open worlds are detrimental to narratives. And I don't think I really agree with that. Again, I think the best narrative is the one that you create yourself through your own actions and decisions, instead of being forced to sit through someone else's narrative, which they kind of forced into the game. For several years now, I've been coming to the conclusion that I enjoy computer games not so much as games, and not even really as stories, but more just as experiences. I don't feel the need for a game to have to incorporate things like character stats or other game mechanics to make it a game. I admit that in the past I have been guilty of denigrating games for not being games. And the example I always come back to is Dreamfall, which is a nice game, but it was widely derided at the time for not being a game because it lacked puzzles or challenge. But looking back, it's like, who cares? Why does it have to have puzzles or challenge? Why can't it just be a nice experience? Why can't you just enjoy walking around and exploring and experiencing the game's beautiful environments? What's wrong with that? Why does it have to be more than that? But this idea certainly didn't start with Dreamfall. Already in 1989, we had SimCity, and SimCity was great, even though a lot of people said it wasn't a game because it has no winning state. You can't really win SimCity. It's just kind of like what people called a software toy. This was kind of like probably the origin of the phrase software toy as a term, as a used term, because there is no overarching goal or mission in SimCity. There is nothing that you really have to accomplish. You have nothing to prove here. You're just building your happy little city. You put down some houses and all the other stuff. You build the schools and the roads and the shops and the parks and the police stations and fire stations and all that stuff. And it was great. SimCity is a great game, even though it's not a game. Like I said, there's no way to win it, but that doesn't really matter. Who cares? Why should that bother people? If you have a great time playing with your simulated city, then why can't that be enough? And, if you really need a goal in SimCity, you can make your own goals. Like maybe you want your city to have a population of, I don't know, 100,000 people. You can go, where is it? My city has nobody right now because I've just started it. But you'll see the population of your city. So you can set as a goal for yourself, I want to have a city with a population of 100,000 people. You can do that. Or, maybe stuff like, the game also has concepts like pollution and crime. So maybe you want to say, I want to make a city which has, below a certain threshold of pollution or crime in the city. You can do that. You can set that as a personal goal for yourself. You can set your own goals. You don't need the game to tell you what to do. You can make your own goals in this kind of an environment. That goes, of course, for a lot of other games and game types as well. Sid Meier is one of the best-known game designers from the classic age of computer games. He's probably best known for for Civilization, but he made a lot of other games, and his games tend to have this sort of quality where they do what I'm describing, where they don't really have a specific concrete kind of goal to them, but they just kind of let you experiment and create your own goals. And Pirates, for example, is like this. This is Pirates. This is the original Pirates. And the story is basically you're a pirate with a pirate ship, and you can sail around and do pretty much whatever you want. You can control where your ship goes sometimes, although I can't seem to control my ship now for some reason. I guess my ship is just getting carried along with the winds. Okay, theoretically you can control what your ship is doing. But the thing is, there's not really any way to win this game. Like, there's no, as far as I know, there's no winning condition for this game. It's just you can gather money and power and skill and all that, but you can make yourself into this really cool badass pirate, but there's no goal at the end. There's no point where the game says you win. And that can be good for some people and bad for other people. Some people want a goal. They want an endpoint where they can say, you can finally say, okay, I'm finished with this game. Whereas other people like to be able to make their own decisions about what they want to do and when they consider themselves to be finished. Darklands is another game like this. Darklands is another game from Microprose, and it's a really nice little simulation of life in Central Europe during the medieval times. But again, there's not really any goal here. Like, you travel around, you can go to different cities and get into fights and do various quests and stuff, but most of the game just lets you go where you want and do whatever you want. And to be able to enjoy a game like that, you have to kind of be able to make your own fun. And again, that's great for some people and not so great for other people. Some people really like Darklands. It might be one of their favorite games of the 1990s. And a lot of people didn't like Darklands because they found it too open. It's just too open-ended. Because there's no real goal here. So again, there's no real winning condition. So like I said, good for some people, bad for other people. And inevitably discussions about stuff like this will lead to the topic of the so-called walking simulator. And this is something I brought up in a video several years ago. I talked about how some people hate walking simulators because they have no point to them. They're just really just about walking around. But again, this is a very individual thing. Again, I keep getting interrupted. Like, this is what I'm talking about. I just want to walk around, and these things keep popping up and interrupting the gameplay. This is what I mean by how games feel the need to make themselves into games. I could just be enjoying the experience of walking around here and enjoying the scenery, but the game says, no, it has to be a game. There has to be some kind of stuff popping up and interrupting you constantly, because otherwise it's not a proper game. So, walking simulators, again, how you feel about them is a very individual thing. A lot of people hate walking simulators. And why is this happening? I just want to walk around. I don't want to fight. Surrender at their mercy. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why games like this kind of spoil themselves by saying, no, we have to be a proper game. There has to be challenge. You can't just enjoy the environment. That's not allowed. So, some people like the freedom and the open-ended nature of walking simulators, and other people just think they're completely boring, like a total waste of time because there's nothing to do in them. It really, it obviously depends on who you are and what you want from a game. So, talking about walking simulators, there's this great article from Rock Paper Shotgun from 2016, as you can see. Which is obviously about walking simulators. And it's actually a conversation between two people about walking simulators and their kind of thoughts and reflections on different walking simulators that they tried. And so they played games like Proteus, which is kind of one of the definitive walking simulators in my opinion. And then they played less well-known games like Burn Band. Burn Band is actually, I like Burn Band. It's a pretty it's a nice experience. Like, there's really not much to it, but these are fun games. These are all, in my personal estimation, very enjoyable experiences if you play computer games just for the experience. If you want a story, of course you'll be disappointed because there is no story. And if you want gameplay, there's not much in the way of gameplay. Again, there's no goal. There are no game mechanics. But if you just want a nice environment to explore, then you've got it here. There's that, and this might actually be better for some people because again, like you just saw, I kept getting annoyed in Darklands because stuff kept happening, stuff kept popping up, and I was like, no, I just want to walk around. I don't want to keep having to get ambushed by people. It's not why I played the game. So there's one quote here in this article which kind of stuck out with me. If I can find it now. Where was it? You can see it's a fairly long article. I would encourage you to read the article yourself. You can see the URL up here, but I'll put the URL in the file description, the video description as well. Um, I mean, I guess I can just search for it. Because one of them said something like, yeah, here we go. Almost every game can be played as a walking simulator. Many are better that way. Get a load of that idea that almost any game can be played as a walking simulator, and many games are better when you play them as walking simulators. Just think about that for a while. This kind of takes us back to the whole battle zone thing again, to the people who wanted to just drive off in their tank and explore the landscape instead of fighting. Imagine how many other games could be completely different experiences if people just played them just to explore. Like something like, I don't know, a Contra pacifist run where you just avoid shooting anything and just walk through the game's environment. Okay, it's obviously not possible for all games. I don't think you can really play Contra without shooting at things because you can't finish the first level if you don't shoot at like the boss enemy, and I mean a lot of games are like that, but you get the idea. The point is that very often you can get the best experience out of a game if you just regard it as an experience rather than something to win or to get good at. So I know I'm getting kind of metaphysical here because this is kind of veering off, no longer talking about games, but this is basically turning the phrase walking simulator into a metonym for being alive, like for human life itself, because the same can be said of life as well. We're born without a goal in life. And that's not to say that you can't have goals in life or shouldn't have goals in life, and certainly it's not bad to create goals for yourself. But if you do that, the thing is you need to create your own goals. You set your own goals in your life because nobody else can tell you what you are living for. So it's kind of like in SimCity or Pirates. You're in this big world and you can kind of walk around a lot and go to different places and experience different things, do different things, have different experiences. And if you want to achieve something, if you want to set a goal for yourself, you can. But no one can tell you what those goals are. You have to decide those goals for yourself. And, it's not that bad once you get used to it. It's like at first it seems overwhelming. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? But once you get used to life, once you get used to, once you've tried a few things in this game world, or, the real world, if it is a real world, you'll understand what you like doing and what you don't like doing. And then you can kind of get an idea of what sort of goals you want to set for yourself. There's this adventure game called Techno Babylon from the year 2015 from Wadjet Eye Games, who have sort of become the Sierra of this generation. They're kind of the primary developers of classic style adventure games in our world today, or one of the primary developers anyhow. But anyway, so Techno Babylon starts with this scene here, with this woman in what's simply called the trance.
There's nothing like being in trance.
Trance with a capital T.
Of abstracts and intellect, of tangible thought, where every part has been crafted by an individual soul. It's the purest form of contact a person can have, mind to mind. It's the pinnacle of human achievement. Some might say that achievement in the physical world is somehow more meaningful. To them I say, join the future or be surpassed by it.
Yeah, so she's very into this whole trans thing. What she's calling the trans here, or I guess what this game universe calls trans, is basically what we used to call cyberspace. It's the experience of being plugged into a virtual world, a world made of information. What what William Gibson, I think, described as a consensual hallucination in Neuromancer in his description of cyberspace. And you can see it's sort of an ecstatic state. It's a state of being disconnected from your physical body and existing in this pure world made of pure light and pure ideas, kind of untethered from the needs of the physical world. And again, that's a dream for some people and a nightmare for others. Some people don't like computer games. Some people just have no need for computer games, and other people can't live without them. For some people, computer games are just as necessary a drug as coffee or heroin. I don't drink coffee or use heroin, but I do play computer games, so I guess everybody needs their own special vice. But now, if I may make things even more cosmic, I think this link between computer games or computer simulations in real life becomes even more compelling if you consider the now popular simulation hypothesis, which is the theory that all of our existence is just a computer simulation, so it's not real. Now, this idea was first popularized by at least for our generation, in our current zeitgeist, it was popularized by the first Matrix movie in the year 1999. But it had existed long before that. In fact, the idea that our world is a simulation goes back thousands of years before computers existed, obviously. Now, obviously, I can't tell you whether our world is a computer simulation because I don't know that any more than you do. Maybe I don't even exist. Maybe I'm just a voice being simulated in your head. Or for me, it's the other way around. Maybe you don't exist and I just imagine you. But if I can be allowed to delve into religion for a moment, and let me say I'm not here to convert anyone or try to suddenly spring some kind of religious doctrine on you, but I do find it interesting that people who believe in science used to say that there was no God or that it was stupid to believe in the idea of a God. But now those same people are starting to say, well, we're probably living in a computer simulation, which basically means that the entity which we used to think of as God is basically like a computer programmer. It's basically the programmer of the simulation. And that's an interesting idea. I find this idea interesting that God is basically a computer programmer. God is whoever made this simulation that we're living in. And this idea becomes more relevant if you think about what people do with computers. I mean, if you think about God games, the quintessential God game was Populous and then later Black and White. Peter Molyneux has a God complex, I guess. But, like here we're looking at Sim Earth. So this is kind of a similar idea. You simulate the whole planet and you can change, different things about the Earth. You can, change its geosphere and all this. It gets pretty scientific, obviously. But again, these are kind of games like what I described before because they don't have set goals. There's not really any end condition, any winning condition for a game like this. They're more just about existing in this game world, for the experience of being here and seeing how you can affect the environment. And why do people make these games? Think about that. Why do people make games like this? Why do people create virtual worlds like this? Why do people like to play God games? I think the answer is fairly obvious because they're curious and they like to play around with them. So, if there is a God, I think God is kind of like the people who make these games and like to play these games. Like, if a character in one of these games asked, like if somebody in a game like Black and White asked you, the player, why did you make this game, or why are you playing this game? What would you answer? The answer is, well, we were bored and we were curious and we decided to make a little world as again, like a software toy. It's not really a game because there are no rules in this game. It's more like just what people decided to create for fun. Again, the software toy, just something to play around with, experiment with, and have some experiences with. And so if there is a God, I think that God probably made our world for the same reason that we like to play games like Civilization or Sim Earth or Populous or all these kinds of games that simulate virtual worlds. Think about the games which exist and have existed just as people simulators. One early example was this game. It's called Little Computer People from Activision. And you just watch a person walk around their house and do their daily stuff like, eat and sleep and whatever else people do in their homes. And this, of course, evolved into stuff like The Sims, which is basically the same idea. I mean, The Sims is also not really a game because there's nothing to win or lose, but it's hugely popular. It's one of the most popular games of all time. People love The Sims. So, again, I mean, I'm not trying to preach here, but I think if there is a God, I think God made this world for the same reason that we make games like this. And also, I think if there is a God, we can probably best understand God by looking at what's been created, not by reading books like the Bible or Quran. I mean, if you're into that stuff, if you want to read books like that, you can. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that or that you shouldn't read it. But I think we can best understand things by looking at the world and observing the world and experiencing the world as it is, not what human beings have done with the world, but just at the world as it is. Because ultimately, if anybody did make all of this, they must have made it for the same reason why people make and play and enjoy computer games like walking simulators and The Sims, or this that that you're seeing on your screen now. So, yeah, there's nothing to win or lose here. It's just this experience of this happy little experience of going through life and doing the tasks that we do in life, and being happy about it, being happy little computer people. But yeah, that's my long way of saying that I play computer games more for the experience than to win a game or to have a story told to me. That's all. Thanks for listening.